Imagine standing on the dry plains of northern Afghanistan. No temples rise from the horizon, no pyramids cut into the sky, no ruined cities whispering their past, only wind, dust, and a series of low, unremarkable hills. To the untrained eye, there is nothing special here, just land shaped by centuries of weather and silence. And yet beneath one of these ordinary hills lay a discovery so extraordinary that it would rewrite what we know about ancient Central Asia. This hill was called Tillya Tepe, the Golden Hill. In the late 1970s, archaeologists surveying the ancient region of Bactria approached this site with modest expectations. There were no visible ruins, no monumental stonework, no signs of a great civilization buried below. At first glance, Tillya Tepe looked like countless other mounds scattered across the region. But archaeology often rewards patience, not appearances. As the first layers of soil were carefully removed, something unexpected began to emerge. Not gold at first, not jewels, but burial structures, simple pits cut into the earth. No stone chambers, no elaborate architecture, just 6 graves. 5 belonged to women, 1 belonged to a man. At this stage, nothing suggested global significance, until the soil around the first skeleton was brushed away and gold appeared. Then more gold. Then an overwhelming cascade of it. Necklaces, bracelets, earrings, belt plaques, weapon fittings, delicate ornaments shaped like animals, leaves, and divine figures. Piece after piece surfaced until the realization became unavoidable. This was not an ordinary burial site. More than 20,000 gold objects would eventually be recovered from these 6 graves. But what stunned archaeologists was not just the quantity, it was the style. The objects from Tillya Tepe did not speak a single cultural language. Instead, they spoke many all at once. Some ornaments depicted Greek gods, including figures recognizable from Hellenistic art. Others carried Persian royal symbolism, echoing traditions of ancient empires. There were Indian-inspired motifs, spiritual and decorative, alongside nomadic steppe animal designs rooted in Central Asian traditions. Even elements that suggested Chinese influence appeared in the patterns and forms. This was not cultural confusion. This was cultural mastery. The people buried at Tillya Tepe lived at the heart of the ancient Silk Road, a crossroads where ideas, goods, and identities flowed freely. Their gold was not imitation, it was synthesis. Tillya Tepe was not on the edge of civilization. It was at the center of movement. Each burial told a story. The women were buried wearing layers of jewelry, not randomly placed, but carefully arranged on the body. Earrings framed the face, necklaces rested across the chest, bracelets circled the wrists, belt plaques ran across the waist in precise alignment. This was ceremonial wealth. These women were not simply wealthy individuals. They were members of an elite class people whose status demanded visual expression even in death. And then there was the crown. In one of the female graves, archaeologists uncovered an object so unexpected that it forced a complete rethinking of ancient nomadic societies. A golden crown. At first glance, it appeared impossibly delicate. Thin gold branches rose upward like trees, each tipped with tiny leaves and birds. The craftsmanship was astonishing, light, elegant, and symbolically rich. But then came the shock. The crown could be taken apart. Each section was designed to detach and fold flat. This was not a ceremonial crown meant to sit permanently on a throne. This was a crown designed for movement, for travel. It belonged to a person who did not rule from a fixed palace, but from a world in motion. This single object shattered a long-held assumption that nomadic elites lacked sophistication. The opposite was true. They understood portability, they understood symbolism, they understood power. As more objects were analyzed, a clear picture began to form. The people of Tillya Tepe did not define themselves by a single empire or ethnicity. Their identity was fluid, shaped by contact, trade, and adaptation. Gold jewelry combined techniques from multiple regions. Gemstones were sourced from distant lands. Artistic styles blended seamlessly, without hierarchy. This was a society comfortable with complexity, and that complexity was intentional. The jewelry was not just decoration, it was communication, a visual declaration of status, legitimacy, and worldview. Among the 6 graves, only one belonged to a man. His burial revealed another layer of Tillya Tepe's story. He was laid to rest with a sword adorned in gold, ornate belt buckles, and weapon fittings crafted with extraordinary care. The design of his equipment suggested a warrior, but not a simple one. Greek craftsmanship blended with steppe traditions. The result was a hybrid identity, part diplomat, part fighter, part ruler. This man was likely a leader, someone who navigated conflict and alliance across cultures. By the time excavation ended, one question dominated every discussion. Who were these people? Were they early Kushan elites, members of the Yuezhi tribes, rulers of a transitional empire that history barely recorded? What was clear is this: they were powerful enough to command immense wealth and connected enough to draw influences from across the ancient world. Tillya Tepe revealed a civilization that did not build in stone, but in movement. One that did not carve monuments into mountains, but carried its power in gold. And yet, this was only the beginning of the story. Because while the treasure had survived nearly 2,000 years underground, it would soon face a far greater threat, one that no ancient burial could protect it from. In part 2, the gold of Tillya Tepe would disappear, and the world would fear it was lost forever. By the time the excavation at Tillya Tepe was complete, one thing was undeniable. This was not just a burial site. It was a statement of power. The sheer quantity of gold, the sophistication of the craftsmanship, and the careful placement of every object all pointed to the same conclusion. The people buried at Tillya Tepe were not ordinary nobles. They were part of a ruling elite that understood how wealth, symbolism, and authority worked together. Gold was not buried here to be hidden. It was buried to be seen by gods, by ancestors, and by the future. Every object from Tillya Tepe speaks the language of authority. The belts were not simple fasteners. They were covered in gold plaques, each engraved with animals and combat lions, griffins, mythical beasts locked in eternal struggle. In the ancient world, these images symbolized cosmic order, chaos confronted, dominance established. The jewelry worn by the women was equally deliberate. Earrings framed the face so that status was immediately visible. Necklaces layered gemstones associated with protection and spiritual power. Bracelets and rings reinforced identity at every gesture. This was power that moved with the body. The man buried among them carried power of a different kind. His sword was not only a weapon, it was a symbol of command. The gold decoration on its hilt ensured that even in darkness, even in death, his authority could not be mistaken. Taken together, the graves suggest a society where leadership was shared among elite families, where women held ceremonial and political influence, and where wealth reinforced legitimacy. But history would soon test how long such power could endure. One of the great puzzles of Tillya Tepe is what isn't there. No cities, no palaces, no monuments carved into the land. This was a civilization that did not anchor itself in stone. Instead, it anchored itself in movement. The elites of Tillya Tepe likely belonged to groups such as the early Kushans or Yuezhi peoples who controlled trade routes rather than territories. Their strength came not from walls, but from connections. Not from fixed borders, but from adaptability. Gold, in this context, made perfect sense. It was portable, recognized everywhere. And immune to decay, gold allowed power to travel, but that same portability would later make the treasure dangerously vulnerable. For nearly 2,000 years, the Bactrian gold slept beneath the earth, untouched by invasions, empires, and time itself. Then came the 20th century. Afghanistan entered decades of conflict. Governments fell, institutions collapsed, museums were looted, cultural heritage was destroyed or sold to survive. During this chaos, rumors began to spread. The Bactrian gold was gone. Some said it had been stolen. Others claimed it had been melted down. Many believed it had been sold piece by piece on the black market, its history erased forever. For scholars, the loss would have been catastrophic. Tillya Tepe was not just a treasure, it was evidence, proof of a world that textbooks barely mention. If the gold was destroyed, an entire chapter of human history would vanish with it. For years, no one could confirm what had happened. The vaults were sealed, records were incomplete, witnesses were silent. In academic circles, Tillya Tepe became a ghost, a legend spoken of in the past tense. The fear was not just about gold, it was about identity. Afghanistan had already lost so much of its tangible history. Losing the Bactrian gold would mean losing one of the few surviving links to a multicultural ancient past. And then against all expectations came the revelation. In the early 2000s, officials announced something almost no one believed at first. The Bactrian gold had survived, hidden away in secret vaults, protected by a small group of museum workers and officials who understood its value. The treasure had been deliberately concealed during the worst years of war. No publicity, no documentation, no guarantees of safety, only trust and courage. When the vaults were finally opened, the gold emerged intact. Thousands of objects, unchanged, unmelted, unbroken. The crowns, the jewelry, the weapons, everything survived. It was a moment that stunned the world. Tillya Tepe had survived twice, once against time and once against war. When the Bactrian gold was displayed again, its meaning had changed. It was no longer just evidence of an ancient elite. It became a symbol of cultural resilience. The gold proved that history does not always belong to conquerors. Sometimes it belongs to those who quietly protect it when everything else collapses. Each object now carried two stories, the story of its creation and the story of its survival. Tillya Tepe challenges how we think about civilization. It shows that power does not require stone monuments, that identity can be fluid and complex, that movement can be a strength, not a weakness. And it reminds us that history is fragile not because it is weak, but because it depends on human choices. Someone chose to bury this gold with meaning. Someone chose to protect it during war. Someone chose not to sell it, even when survival was uncertain. Those choices mattered. The people of Tillya Tepe lived in a world of exchange, adaptation, and uncertainty. Their gold reflects a civilization that understood change and prepared for it. Today, their story speaks directly to us, because even now, beneath unremarkable ground, beneath silence and dust, there are histories waiting to be uncovered. And once uncovered, they depend on us to survive. If this story moved you, like the video to support deep historical storytelling, subscribe to the channel for more lost treasures and forgotten civilizations, and comment below. What ancient mystery should we explore next? Because history doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it waits quietly until someone is ready to listen.